Our thesis statement. Our thesis statement is the argument and damage caused by the British and the Irish fighting. To expand on the idea, we want to show you how the Irish were being treated unfairly and given not many human rights as the blacks were persecuted in the United States. This is a similar protest, but America's was done much quicker and resolved in way less time. Background: the split between Ireland. 1919 to 1921, the Irish Republican Army had ambushed police and soldiers in pursuit of an Irish Republican. As a war continuing in the Catholic South, the mostly Protestant north side of Ireland carved out a new British territory called Northern Ireland, with its own parliament. Britain's 1921 treaty with the IRA, which had determined the shape of Ireland and was accepted by most rebels, created a new Irish Free State. It was functioning independently, but had still remained tied to Britain. A common misconception about the Troubles was that it wasn't a fight against two religions, rather a fight against two different countries. It was never about the Protestants or the Catholics fighting. It was about the Irish and the Britons fighting. Throughout history, Britain has turned their back to the Irish. During the famine, the British never sent help or food to them whatsoever. In other instances, when they begged for help, Britain never responded. The IRA did not care if you were Catholic, Protestant, black, white, any race. If you were pro-British, they wanted you out. This was a very clear statement Father O'Shea made to me when we had the interview together. For our main idea, we want to demonstrate the destruction that was caused by the British and the Irish fighting. One of those instances is called Bloody Friday. A massive bombing was created by the IRA. Nearly 27 civilians dead and 7 policemen also dead. It was not bombing, but rather bombings. A span of 130 bombs detonated within 80 minutes, mostly targeting infrastructures and transportation. Though the Irish weren't mad at the IRA for carrying out the attacks, rather the British for not getting out, as Father O'Shea put it in our interview. This is Father O'Shea. Father O'Shea was in Ireland during the time of the Troubles. He was not directly in the Irish Republic, but he was on the opposite side of the island, and it will give us an insight onto what the other people on the island thought at that point of time. He is a little old and he rambles a bit, so we couldn't use all of the audio that we've collected. This is Father O'Shea.
The religion of the Irish was Catholic. The religion of Scottish and that part of England was Protestant. So a lot of the people that England rewarded were not Catholics, they were Protestants. And they settled here in that part of Ireland because that's what England gave them as a reward for helping them in the war. So the Troubles then was pretty much confined to that area because the Irish did not want their land to be ruled by the English. So over the years, if you read the history of it, there were various uprisings against England. Well, especially now I'm talking about the Troubles, because the Troubles were very recent. They were in the 1970s or something, that period.
The 1890s to the 2000s, going on present day.
So the troubles were just in that part because a lot of the people, especially those that were very, very anti-British, rose up in rebellion against the English to drive them out of Northern Ireland. Because that part of Ireland, Northern Ireland, was ruled by the British. And naturally, those that were Irish didn't like that. And the troubles began in Northern Ireland pretty much because of what happened in America. In that time in America, the civil rights movement down south rose up in protest. They had marches and everything else. Martin Luther King, for instance. And the Irish then, well, if they can do that in America, rise up against the discrimination and everything else that the people down south were experiencing, why can't we rise up against the British? Because we too are experiencing all kinds of discrimination.
I see.
Do you see?
Yeah.
So that's how the Troubles kind of, what you call the Troubles was an uprising. It began, or it got its roots from what was happening down in the south of America. Places like, I don't know, Alabama and Georgia and all these southern states, that's where all the marches and trouble was in America at that time, because the blacks were being very discriminated against. Well, the Irish too felt they were being very discriminated against too. So they kind of rose up against the English. So that's how the Troubles began.
Short-term and long-term impact. After the argument was made, there were still protests going on. Not everyone had agreed with it, and there was still worry that the attacks would be more and more and more. There still are a few here and there that what will happen from time to time, but nothing like what had originally been. The protesting was not having sufficient impact. Along with the attacks, people had also been doing hunger strikes, and those eventually started to die out after a while. Everything was starting to die down. The protesting, the bombings, the fighting. But there are still some remains from the Troubles. For example, peace signs or peace walls. A series of separation barriers in the Northern Ireland that was used to keep the Irish and the British away from each other. That wall has not fallen down and will be there for a while, like a sign of the Irish's hatred toward the British. In conclusion, the Troubles was a violent civil rights movement that had killed over 3,600 people and thousands more were injured. A lot of things have happened in the span of 100 years. Bombs, terrorist attacks, but Ireland held strong and eventually won out over the British. There are still a lot of arguments on this topic to this day, and even some going on in Ireland. But that's all behind us now, and the Irish can move forward, and the rest of the world can learn from their mistakes and better themselves as a country.